Borough Council full council meeting held on Wednesday, the 16th of June 2021 via Microsoft Teams. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the authority. Item 1, are there any apologies for absence?
I think everybody is here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Okay, members are reminded their personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act and Finance Act 1992 relating to the Council Tax, Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Members' Code of Conduct. Any declarations?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ferris. Item 3 is a presentation by Judith Jones on Ash Dieback. So I'll hand you over to Judith now.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening all. The purpose of this short presentation is just to raise awareness amongst councillors of the Ash Dieback issue that we find ourselves in at the moment. I'll run through some slides to provide some information, and then there'll be opportunities for question at the end. I'm also joined by Rob Barnett and Andrew Taylor from the grounds maintenance section who can answer questions as well. Okay, so start off with what is Ash Dieback. You're probably aware of it from the media. Ash Dieback is the most significant tree disease to affect the UK since Dutch elm disease. It has the potential to infect more than 2 billion UK ash trees and lead to the death of approximately 90% of them. It's predicted that Ash Dieback in the UK will cost 15 billion to address. The largest proportion of this cost, 9 billion, is the loss of ecosystem services provided by ash trees, including things like improving air quality and mitigating the effects of climate change. As you can imagine, it's a major ongoing safety issue. And in Merthyr, we've developed a 5-year management plan to mitigate the risks. And this could cost up to £2 million to implement. This will include felling diseased trees, replanting and increased surveying to highlight issues. So some images here just to show what Ash Dieback is. The first photo is health class 1, and that shows a kind of 100 to a 75% remaining canopy. There's obviously a class 2 and a class 3, but the last photo then is class 4, and that shows the impact of Ash Dieback with 0 to 25% of the canopy remaining. You may have seen this not only in Merthyr, but throughout travel throughout Wales, the devastating impact that Ash Dieback has. So we produced an Ash Dieback action plan in order to tackle this issue. The action plan prioritises risk, with the highest risk being trees along the highway and the next highest risk being trees in schools and parks. The action plan provides general management advice, and it considers impact on landscape, biodiversity, landowners, homeowners and infrastructure. It considers how we can recover from this, what the financial implications are, and it follows plans produced by other county councils throughout the UK. So in particular, how will Ash Dieback affect Merthyr Tydfil? Well, local authorities with experience of Ash Dieback have recognised that the disease represents a significant corporate risk. And those main areas are health and safety, as you could imagine, potential for death or injury as a result of Ash Dieback related accidents. Economic risk, so the increased liabilities in case of injury as a result of it, and obviously increased expenditure to tackle the issue. There's also the risk of reputational damage, because as you can imagine, to tackle Ash Dieback is going to be a significant amount of tree removal, and that will result in a number of road closures. And then obviously the environmental impact. Merthyr, is obviously rich in terms of its landscape and biodiversity, but this will have an adverse impact on that. Early visual inspections indicate that the worst affected areas within the county borough are the Vayner ward, Treharris ward and northern boundary of the Gurness ward. In terms of resources, the resources required to carry out works to council trees where risks are identified. So at the moment, the team consists of a tree officer who's seconded and 2 arborists. Obviously, in order to tackle the scale of this problem, is going to be far more resources required. There's the issue of trees on private land, and obviously there'll be resources required to engage with owners. Because if there's private landowners with Ash Dieback on their land, then we need to engage with those. There's likely to be an increased number of proposals for works to trees. The planning department will receive more applications. Tree works carried out adjacent to highways will require traffic management and inevitably lead to traffic disruption. And tree contractors may be difficult to secure due to demand. As you imagine, every local authority virtually in the UK is suffering from this. So the amount of tree contractors around are obviously going to be in short supply. From a trading standard perspective as well, we've identified that there's may well be opportunity for unscrupulous contractors, so that may mean more work for them. And then there's the resource required to replant to retain biodiversity and mitigate environmental effects. So estimating the financial costs of the disease to the council, in terms of trees on highway adopted land, almost 2,000 trees were assessed as being at risk or showing symptoms of Ash Dieback, with an overall projected remediation cost of £682,000. On council-owned land, 849 trees were surveyed with a projected remediation cost of just over £300,000. And on private-owned land, 978 trees were surveyed at a projected remediation cost of just over £380,000. This slide just shows the breakdown of the issue in terms of different classification of roads. So you can see that the most affected roads are C roads, closely followed by A roads. And this slide then just breaks those category of roads down into those Ash Dieback trees on council land and those on private land. Looking then at education, it's estimated that identifying ash trees and removing issues associated with Ash Dieback in schools will cost £100,000 over 5 years, and that's based on the number of primary and secondary schools that we have. And resurveying the schools should occur annually, costing in the region of £200 per school over a 5-year period, which would equate to £28,000 in surveying costs. So the total cost assumptions, if you look at adopted highways, education, public open spaces and rights of way, and the kind of three main areas, so increased surveying, felling and replanting, comes to an eye-watering amount of almost £2 million. So just to let you know what we've done to date, all trees within the county borough have been surveyed. We've produced a method statement to ensure adherence to the Environment Act 2016, and this has been produced by the council's ecologist. Tenders are being prepared to outsource tree removal on A and B roads, and costs are being obtained and availability of arborists established to inform if other works required are carried out in-house or are outsourced. And some funding became available at the end of the last financial year through the Welsh Government Green Recovery Fund, and we used this money to purchase equipment and address affected trees in Cyfarthfa Park. So the key next steps that we've set out are obviously we need to raise public awareness about this to help understand why there will be disruption, because inevitably there's going to be road closures, etc., as we tackle the problem to remove these trees. We need to appoint a permanent tree officer. As I mentioned earlier, the current tree officer is a seconded role within grounds maintenance, and you may have noticed that there is there's a report later on the agenda tonight on that item. We need to create an Ash Dieback management team to include those relevant officers. So that would include the tree officer, the ecologist. There's going to be need for highways input, legal input, communications in terms of raising awareness, estates, finance, IT, and a chief officer to steer it. We need to continue liaising with Sutra and the utility companies, because obviously there's Ash Dieback trees on their land, so we want to make sure that we're linking up with them, and carrying out work that complements each other. And we also need to continue working with the WLGA to lobby Welsh Government for funding in this respect. So to conclude, the estimate for dealing with Ash Dieback within local authorities' boundaries is almost 2 million over the next 5 years. This estimate includes additional tree surveying, felling and replacement planting. When the statutory duties of serving notices on private owners and dealing with private complaints are included, the additional costs will be approximately £100,000. Are there any questions?
Okay, Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if one of the officers could tell me, I noticed in Cyfarthfa Park a number of trees have been felled. Are they all due to Ash Dieback? And if so, have they all been dealt with?
Yeah, a lot of the trees in Cyfarthfa Park have been addressed through the Green Recovery Fund at the end of last year. Andrew or Rob, I don't know if you can comment if that's all the reason for all the felling in Cyfarthfa Park.
It's dealt with the majority of ash trees diseased in Cyfarthfa, not all of them. As Judith just said, we use some funding from the Green Recovery Fund to deal with the worst ones. So they are prioritised. So the most risky ones are dealt with first, obviously. There are probably still some within the park, but they would be within the forest areas, really, rather than adjacent to pathways. Any adjacent to pathways which were deemed a high risk were dealt with as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Clive. Councillor Tanya Skinner is next, please.
Yeah, my question is to Judith, and I was just wondering, obviously the presentation laid out the extensive work involved. I wondered how long is it estimated for this to be completed? So I noticed in one of the reports it mentioned about a 5-year project, but I wondered whether specifically to the Ash Dieback, how long it's likely to take before the issue is sorted out?
Yeah, so we're estimating 5 years at the moment, but obviously as part of it, we need to keep resurveying the trees every year. So obviously there is the potential, you know, that it could continue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Geraint Thomas, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, it's a disaster for the species, isn't it, for the ash tree species? And the question I got is, of the replanting side of it, are we going to replant healthy ash trees, or is there no hope for that species whatsoever?
Do you want me to come in there, Judith? Yes, ideally, Councillor, they will be replaced with ash trees. There are species which are becoming available, which are resistant to the disease. Also, the protocol is where we can leave ash, even though there's disease present, if we can leave them, there may be some resistance which is built up naturally. So we won't fell every diseased tree within the borough. We'll have to assess those, and where there's a light indication of the disease, we will leave that, and maybe that will build up resistance. But yeah, there are species out there, either suitable replacements which are not ash, or ash trees which are resistant. So that's what we'll be trying to do in the future.
Okay, thank you. Councillor David Jones, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Where there are trees that are diseased on private land, will the private landowners pay for the extermination, for want of a better word, or is that part of the funding that the authority are looking at? That's part one. There is another part to it.
Well, we have a duty as the local authority, if there's any trees that obviously fall onto our land or are dangerous, to remove them. However, we would try and recover those costs from the private landowner. Obviously, you know, that's not always possible for various reasons, but we would try to. Is there anything else on that, Rob?
No, you're correct, Judith. Where there's a risk to the public, under the Local Government Act miscellaneous provisions, we can intervene Obviously, we'd liaise with the landowners first, and where they can do the work themselves, so be it. But where they can't, we would undertake the work and we would bill the landowner.
Right, thank you very much for that. And the other one then is where there are like the A470, will the Welsh Government be paying for the removal of trees along that type of stretch, or where they own the land?
Yeah, the bulk of our roads are governed by SUTRA, the South Wales Trunk Road Agency, so they will have the responsibilities the same as us, and it will be their funding or Welsh Government funding that will deal with that. A lot of them will have been done already, as you can see, moving throughout the locality. They've started already.
Lovely, thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Julian Amos, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, really. I've had to phone up about some trees that are causing problems, especially during the storms. And some have been on Merthyr Tydfil's homes grounds, and they've got an officer, a tree officer, and they've got, I presume, staff under him. Have we had any contact with them to sort of have some sort of arrangement for joint working with a view to perhaps cutting costs? Because I think they have quite a significant number of trees themselves on their estates. Actually, I think you did mention the north of the Gurness, but I don't know if that would be part of theirs. Has anybody looked at talking to them?
Yeah, we work closely with Mike McNulty, who's the guy in charge. They haven't got a tree officer themselves, so we do a lot of their surveying work anyway. And the bulk of the works that are undertaken on Merthyr Valley Homes land is done by council operatives.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Amos. Councillor Clive Jones again then, please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I should have asked this originally as well. In the budget, is the funding you get from this green funding, has that covered the work we're doing for this year, or have we had to dip into council monies? And has anybody got any idea what it's actually costing directly to the local authority?
Yeah, the Green Recovery grant was quite a small grant, actually. I think it was in the region of £70,000. Some of it which was used to purchase equipment, large tract chippers, etc., which will help us to tackle the problem. But when I first took this problem to Cabinet, they set up a separate code. So any Ash Dieback works which is carried out at the moment, whether it be felling or disposal of timber or equipment, there is a separate code. So the accountants are keeping track of any spend which is Ash Dieback related.
So did we allocate any funding at all directly from council funds in the budget, back in March?
There hasn't been a set fund allocated, but as I say, there's a code being set up and the accountants are monitoring that code, so the spend will be reviewed on a monthly basis. Yeah, some of the work has to be done, so this code was set up initially for that purpose.
Yeah, but the enormous cost of this and the number of trees I suspect are involved, we would have to, I would have thought, budget for this every year. Certainly if we got a 5-year management scheme. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, at least for 5 years, as per the ADAP, we would have to allocate funds. Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clive. Councillor Skinner, your hand was up, but it's gone down again. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm allowed though, because I asked one before. I can't remember.
Technically, you should all ask your questions once, but it's not a formal debate. This is just a presentation, so you can probably all ask questions again.
It was to do with the secondment, Carrie, so I'll keep it for the other agenda item. It's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then Councillor David Jones, then please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I hadn't thought of the question until something that Rob Barnett just said. Are we allowed to use the materials in this for recycling, to go towards a recycling, or because there's contamination in there, can it not be counted towards a recycling?
Yeah, there's no current restrictions on the movement of timber, so all the recoverable timber is in our recycling stream. Yeah, so it does aid us in that respect.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. No one else is indicating, so thank you very much for Judith and Rob for the information. Very interesting, very informative. Thank you very much. So we move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is minutes of previous meetings, and we'll take these all together. This is sections 4A to 4P. Would someone like to move those, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move those minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments regarding the accuracy of the minutes? Councillor Clive Jones?
Thank you, Chair. It's a correction to the minutes on page 59 under Social Services Scrutiny. If you look under the heading Other Councillors in Attendance, I think that should be Councillor Chris Davis and not Councillor Chris Jones.
Okay, thank you. Can we get that looked at and corrected then, please? Are there any other comments? No, we'll take that to the vote then, please. You conducting the...
Yes, so if everybody could just pause for a second and put your hands back down. Sorry, we will deal with this just as a straight vote. Anybody voting in favour, please show now.
Sorry, in favour to confirm, Caris?
Yes.
Yeah.
So everyone voting in favour, please show now. Is everybody there? That I think is it. Yes, so that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody lower their hands then, please? Okay, and then we'll move on to item 5, committee reports, procurement rules, to consider the report of the interim chief executive. And I understand that Andrew Barry is taking this item.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Procurement rules. Summary of the report quite succinctly tells the story here in that every 3 years we need to review the procurement process, albeit pandemic affected that timeline. But now we've got the review. With thanks to Paul Davis and the team for the review of the structure, which is not only the core of how we acquire all goods, services and works in this authority, but potentially one of the key elements to our future sustainability. Section 4 broadly outlines these changes. I particularly want to bring members' attention to 4.6 to 4.8, relating to section 6 of the policy, thresholds, excuse me, and local access to procurement within the council to our own business community. You'll note that 4.8, the lower limit, is now raised from 5 to 15,000. The original increase was 10, but we know that RCT has a lower limit of 15, and sort of from a regional perspective, we thought it better to bring in line with them. I'd like to think that having far more choice of businesses being able to access our process will see significant competition in the lower level contracts, ensuring best price and value for money principles in securing procurement of our goods and services. This report is significant in ensuring that there exists a golden thread between increased local business knowledge stemming from our grants exercise and savings from our competition that takes us on a journey of sustainability as this authority through the role of procurement. The report is a constituent part of a wider process of inclusion of the people of this county borough. We will need a meet the buyer event, which we've spoken about, type of event to show businesses in this area how to procure work from us. The authority has never held such an event to promote our own buying power and is long overdue. I'll take members to the recommendation, which is only one at 2.1, the revised procurement rules to come into effect on the 1st of July 2021 be approved. I move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Is there a seconder, please?
I'm happy to, oh, apologies, Councillor Thomas is seconding it.
Yeah, I'd second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Are there any questions? Councillor Harvey-Jones, you have your hand up, but is that a legacy hand from the vote?
I think that it is, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so and Councillor Skinner had a hand up, so Councillor Skinner then, please.
Yeah, it was just a question on 4.6, Andrew, and it mentions that we can invite local companies, and you alluded to the fact that there's cost savings. My question was around the fact that this isn't exactly aimed at Merthyr. In the past, all local authorities have come under fire before because procurement rules have meant that we end up paying far much over market value for things, and it's never been seen as a very cost-effective system. So I wonder whether you could just tell me a little bit more in terms of whether this change, how far it will go in terms of addressing that concern.
Yeah, Councillor Skinner. I mean, the issue of procurement by the local authority is multifaceted. We only have 3 procurement officers at the moment. An increase in that number will certainly go a long way to ensuring that we achieve those the ideal position of having more competition within the system, and certainly raising that lower limit to 15,000 will allow us just to look at best value and not go through the whole procurement process, which opens it up a lot more to local companies, which is the idea really in terms of getting this local economy spinning. One of the issues for me is that, you know, the larger companies who tend to get these contracts and have somewhat of a stranglehold on it have got dedicated people to work on the procurement process. What we need to do now is to go out to the business community here and show them that it's not as difficult as perhaps they think, as to be able to work with us, and that 15,000 lower level limit threshold will really open it up to competition, which means savings for us in the longer term. So there are a number of things that have got to come together here. That's what I'm saying, is part of a wider process, but we've certainly started down that road with the report that Paul has written here. I don't know whether Paul is with us today. I don't know whether you want to add anything there, Paul.
Yeah, can do. Thank you. Yeah, in response to Councillor Skinner's question, the purpose of the revision of the rules this time is to make those processes easier for our local community, our suppliers and providers out there. So it's kind of key, because the £15,000 limit takes a large chunk of our smaller contracts and makes them more accessible to our local economy and wider, to be honest. The other areas which have been there's been minor changes in the rules allow us to engage quicker as well, so we can go through the process far quicker than we were before. And obviously the term ring fence is there to help us to consider local companies where possible. So that's the key word. And the other key word I would say with regards to the rules is proportionality. So if you've got a £15,000 requirement, then the process that you go through needs to be proportional to that 15,000. So we need to consider the skills then of our suppliers so that they have the skills to respond to our requirements. And that's what it was about, and it's balancing those.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Just one other question. It was around it mentions in the report that it's reviewed every 3 years. So my question is, with this coming out of the EU, When do we foresee more changes occurring with procurement? And if so, should we be waiting 3 years for the next review? Should we be allowing for that, for it to be evolving as things change?
Yeah, the normal cycle is 3 years. We are expecting a change to UK procurement law. There is a white paper that was out for consultation last year that's being pushed through government at the moment. So we are expecting changes, and obviously Welsh Government as well have authority to set Welsh procurement policy as well, of which they did a new Welsh procurement policy statement back in March this year. Some of the changes that we've made takes into account that as well. So yeah, whilst it's 3 years, if needs be, then we can obviously update the rules on a more frequent basis.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Councillor David Jones, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When people are applying for contracts up to £15,000 now, will they still need to be registered with Sell to Wales or any other listing?
No, the supplier won't need to be registered on Sell to Wales, but we would encourage that because it gives them access to wider opportunities from the rest of the public sector. So we do encourage that with all our suppliers anyway, but they won't need to be registered on any systems. But obviously our buyers will need to be mindful of some background checks on that company just to make sure they are suitable for contracting with.
And I think just to add to that, those type of questions are exactly why we need a meet the buyer event for us, because it is complicated. When you talk about the one-man operations, it's exactly that type of thing they need to know. And it can be quite daunting, when you think you've got to go to Sell to Wales and then you've got to go through the system. And we just need to demystify that for people, I think.
And I'm glad to hear that you're looking to do something to make that path easier or more clearer for various business owners.
Okay, thank you. No one else is indicating. Any more questions?
Oh,
Councillor David Chaplin.
Sorry, I had my hand up early for comments.
Oh, thank you. Well, we'll move on to comments now. Councillor Chaplin, so you can go first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The procurement came up on the Economic Recovery Board, and thank Paul Davis, because me and Councillor Gibbs spent an hour and a half with him last week going through the procurement process they use and his vision for the business. And as a former procurement specialist with over 30 years experience, I wish to thank Paul for the way he organises and some of the modern practices that he uses, things like he's been adopting category management, and I'm very pleased with that. And the removal of the thresholds are going to allow him to do a lot more. You mentioned the Meet the Buyer event, and I did mention in the meeting with Paul, it would be nice if we included other companies like Merthyr Valley Homes and manufacturers in Merthyr, and perhaps make it a bigger event. And that was my suggestion. And all I'd like to say is thank Paul and his small team for the way that they manage and the excellent job that they do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Chaplin. Councillor Darren Roberts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's exactly the same comment as that Councillor Chaplin just made. I know that a good piece of work was done with the Economic Recovery Board, and that Paul and his team afforded the time to Councillor Gibbs and Chaplin to discuss their queries and answer their questions. And I think it was a very, very productive meeting by all accounts. So thank you to Paul and his team, and also thank you to David and Kevin for taking the time to look into this, which I think is crucial for the local authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Chris Davis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say this is an excellent report as we reset for resilience and we embark on our recovery out of COVID, that you know, the council takes seriously the buy-in power and the money that it has in the authority to stimulate the local market and ultimately support local business. I think, you know, that's going to be absolutely crucial for the success and sustainability of the business community within the County Borough of Merthyr Tydfil as we move forward. This you know, great work being done by Paul Davis and his team. I just wanted to thank obviously my colleagues, you know, Councillor Barry and Councillor Thomas for leading and championing this work, kind of moving forward. This could only be but a positive thing for the business community and ultimately the County Borough of Merthyr Tydfil. So da iawn everybody, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. The only other person indicating to speak is Councillor Geraint Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's, you know, a great report. It's going to give small businesses in Merthyr Tydfil a chance to have a bite of the £79 million cherry that Merthyr County Borough Council, Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council spends annually. And also, post-COVID, coming out of COVID, with the amount of building works and operational matters that the council are taking part in at the minute, there's a shortage of businesses, you know, and upping the spend from 5,000 to 15,000 is going to give them chance as well to give our officers a chance to get this work done quickly, because there's going to be a lot more businesses able to bid for this work. So it's a great report, and you know, I welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. So we'll move to the vote then. So Caris, are you conducting the vote, please?
I will. So could all members who wish to abstain on this item please show now? Thank you. Could all members who wish to vote against this item please show now? Thank you. And all members voting in favour of this item please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Okay, thank you very much. So if everybody could lower their hands, please. And then we'll move on to item number 6, grievance policy and procedure, to consider the report of the interim chief executive. And I understand this is Councillor Andrew Barry again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Grievance policy and procedure. Back in March last year, we approved several HR policies as part of our review of policies, keeping them up to date in relation to legislation and the circumstances of the authority, particularly over the last year. That was most relevant. Here we have the grievance policy, last updated 2015. Section 3 outlines the rationale, while 3.4, members will see the report, has been updated with consultation throughout with the unions. The policy is at the appendices and the recommendations, of which there are 2.1 and 2. 2.1, the grievance policy be approved, and 2.2, delegated authority be given to the head of human resources for any future amendments to the policy in consultation with the portfolio member be approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Minton. Are there any questions? I see some hands were left up previously from the vote, so I don't think there are questions on that. So I think it's Councillor Clive Jones, I think, is the first person.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome this updated report. I've got a question in relation to the grievance policy. On page 127, paragraph 7, under the heading mediation, second paragraph down, it says in there are trained mediators within human resources. Could somebody tell me how many trained mediators we've got in Merthyr Tydfil, please?
I'm not sure who's on who would be able to answer that question. I'm not sure if Fran Donnelly is on. I don't think that she is, Councillor Clive Jones. I wonder if we can just get that information to you later.
Is Beverly Taylor on?
Yes, I was going to ask a question. Is she there?
No, would it be all right if we get our information to you tomorrow?
Yeah, yes, if that could be sent to all the members, yes.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? No one is indicating. Are there any comments?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor David Jones.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise. Yes, Councillor David Jones had his hand up for a question. Apologies, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a bit of clarity, really, on the recommendation 2.2. Delegated authority be given to the head of HR for any future amendments to the policy in consultation with a portfolio member be approved. Does that mean that it won't be coming back to council, or will there be reviews as this one along the way?
I think, Councillor Jones, these are just minor amendments. We could put this through scrutiny should you want to scrutinise any issues coming through HR. I think this is just to avoid bringing every item from HR through to full council at any turn. It's much the same in line with the other policies that we brought back in March when we've got to annually review them all. It's rather than bring them all back all the time. It's just trying to streamline the process. I don't know whether we want to look at it through scrutiny in future. Do you want the reports to come through there, perhaps?
No, I was just curious because with the wording, the way that reads to me, and though I may be reading it wrong, is that we're not going to, full council will not review a grievance policy in the future because it will be dealt with by the head of HR and the portfolio member. That's just the way it reads to me. Perhaps I've got it wrong.
Perhaps I can help there. I think what it's supposed to mean is amendments, exactly as Councillor Barry has said, amendments to that policy, which would mean minor changes, would be dealt with in the way exactly as Councillor Barry has explained. Any revision of that policy would come back. So it's not for you for the power to have it revised completely is being delegated. It's only if there are amendments to it, so minor changes.
Could that be put in there somewhere, please?
I'm sure it can. Yes, we can just change the wording slightly if you like, Councillor Jones, and just make sure that it reflects that, as long as Councillor Barry's happy with that.
Yeah, I've got no problem with that, Monitor Officer. What would you suggest we put in to clarify that?
Just a minor amendments bit that is adequate, rather than any full reviews of the policy will be carried out by full council.
Yeah, I think we can probably say minor amendments, power to carry out minor amendments can be delegated in exactly the way that the phrasing works.
If Democratic Services can make a note of that, and then we can move on that policy, if that's okay, on that recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No, so we'll move on to comments then, please. Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome the report, and I'm a little bit concerned that the grievance policy has taken 6 years to be updated. It's crucial for any well-run organisation to have a really updated policy that everybody can understand, particularly with grievance procedure. And I note that within the summary of the report that the Equalities and Human Rights Commission recommends an annual review is undertaken to reflect any changes to employment law or changes to the employer's circumstances. So I hope that will happen in future, that we will be accepting the EHRC's recommendation that these workplace policies are updated every 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Are there any other comments? Councillor Jeremy Davis.
Yeah, I got to agree with some other councillors there. I think it needs to be dated every year, definitely. And say it hasn't been reviewed for 6 years. I know we had a pandemic, but this should have been done a long time ago.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other comments? No other comments, so I'll pass it over to you then, Caris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Jeremy Davis, can you put your hand down now, please? Thank you. So, as before, can I ask any member wishing to abstain, can you please show now? Thank you. Any member wishing to vote against, please show now. Thank you. And any members voting in favour, please show now. That's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. If all members could lower their hands again then, please. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 7, establishment of a commercial unit to consider the report of the interim Deputy Chief Executive. And I understand Councillor Thomas is taking us through this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's really a step forward from item number 5, really, on the procurement department, moving into the commercial unit. So the summary report is set out starting at 1.1 that Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council generates and engage in a substantial amount of commercial activity. In an average year, the council spends £79 million in the purchase of goods and contracted services. Despite this level of commercial activity in the main, the council does not operate as a commercial organisation. The report presents recommendations to enable Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council to move to a commercial operating model over a series of development phases. And these are set out in items number 5 to 5.9 in the report. The proposal is based around the creation of a commercial unit, the restructure of the existing procurement and payments function, the recruitment of one additional strategic procurement officer, one data and project support officer, and the employment of a commercial manager. The new commercial unit will sit within economic regeneration services under the regeneration, transformation and commercialisation portfolio. The unit will give the council a commercial capacity that has previously not existed to assess commercial gain from existing spend and to explore commercial opportunities with other social sector partners. Combining the commercial and economic development function with the authority will also enable the council to explore wider investment opportunities associated with the continued economic regeneration of Merthyr Tydfil. If I can take members to numbers 5.10 to 5.13, over the last 10 years, Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council has developed a successful economic regeneration capacity. This capacity has created several phases of physical regeneration, especially associated with Merthyr Tydfil Town Centre, and given an enhanced level of support to local business. Investment in business startup by the economic regeneration team has resulted in additional 207 new businesses over the last 5 years, 44 in the last year, which is quite amazing, really, considering the year we've had. The success has been based on accessing large amounts of external grant funding that is invested in the physical and business infrastructure of the town. Historically, the local authority has not received any financial return from this work. The Economic Regeneration Department does, however, run a commercial business centre model at the Orbit, which has generated an annual surplus for the last 5 years. Combining a new commercial function with the council's mature and successful economic development provision will create the opportunity to assess any commercial investments associated with the ongoing regeneration and economic development process. This will be subject to further council report. This is an important point in 5.13. The development of commercialisation, as highlighted in the report and required for the delivery of the Recovery, Transformation and Improvement Plan, the RTI plan. The scope of commercial projects will impact upon any aspects of council business in the coming years as we seek to identify and deliver new sustainable income streams. In the financial implications 6.1, you can see the costs of the new officers involved. And as we agreed in 6.2, that the commercial manager post has already been incorporated into the structure. So if I go to the recommendations set out in 2.1 to 2.4, that the creation of a new commercial unit be approved, the restructure of the existing procurement and payment service to enable the creation of a commercial unit be approved, the recruitment of 2 additional strategic procurement officers be approved, the combination of the commercial and economic development functions be approved. I so move, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder, please?
Second, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barry. Questions? Councillor Skinner, please.
Yeah, it was a question on the HR side of things. I know that I think it might have been through scrutiny, or it might have been another council meeting. There were questions asked around job descriptions, and again, there's nothing with this report. So it's just, I wonder why we don't tend to get job descriptions, because we're being asked to authorise spends for posts that we don't really know what they're going to be doing, apart from what it says in the report. And secondly, I wondered what the timescales are for recruitment for all posts.
Yeah, perhaps if I can answer that, Chair. The description for the existing strategic procurement officer is that of existing posts, so that currently exists. There's a slight amendment to that job description for the data officer. There's a new job description that's been developed for the commercial manager, and that's currently being assessed through job evaluation at the moment. But I'm happy to make available those job descriptions once they're all finalised.
Where would they become available then, Alan? Would they just be sent to us, or would it go through council again, or?
No, after this, after they've been finalised, Councillor Skinner, then I'm happy to share them with council as an addition to this report.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Clive Jones.
I think Mr. Mayor was first, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, his hand's gone down on my screen.
Ah, sorry. In that case, Councillor Clive Jones then.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got 2 questions. The first one is in relation to recommendation 2.3 for the 2 additional strategic procurement officers. If members look at page 145 under the financial implications, we are talking about 3 officers there. So could Alan confirm that the 2 positions to be advertised first is the commercial manager and the procurement officer, and the data and project officer will come later on?
I don't think there's any particular sequence, Councillor Jones. If obviously we have approval already for the employment of a new commercial manager, and if this report is approved, then we're ready, once the job description has been finalised, to go out to advert. But if obviously all three positions are ready for advertisement, there's no reason why they all can't go out at the same time.
But surely in the recommendations, you're talking about 3 positions. Shouldn't that be specified in 2.3 that it's for the recruitment of 3 additional posts?
My understanding was that it was implicit in the report, Councillor Jones, that there are 3 additional posts, one of which has been approved, and 2 additional procurement posts.
Alan, I've learned by many years of experience that as a councillor, if you don't have them in the recommendations, that doesn't necessarily mean to say that everything in the report has been accepted. And if we do need, and I suspect we do, a data and projects officer, that should be included in 2.3?
Yeah, I'll refer to the monitoring officer, and if that needs to be amended to be more specific, then we're happy to be far clearer in the recommendation.
It's really a matter between you and Councillor Geraint-Thomas. If Councillor Geraint-Thomas is happy to concede an amendment which specifies those two posts there, it's not something that's a requirement, but it's clearly a preference that's being expressed by Councillor Clive Jones, so it can either be dealt with by way of an amendment being proposed and everybody can vote on it, or if Councillor Geraint-Thomas is happy to include that, and I suspect that would be subject to you, Alan, saying whether you're happy to include those specifics, then Councillor Geraint-Thomas could agree just to amend the recommendation that he's putting before council, and that could become the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, monitoring officer, because the intent of the report was the approval of three additional posts. If Councillor Thomas is happy with that, then I'm happy to advise Councillor Thomas that we can amend.
Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, happy with that. Monitor officer, yes.
Great. So does that deal with it for you, Councillor Clive Jones?
Yes, indeed. If that's added to it, it does. And thank you for that. My second question is in relation to the financial implications in paragraph 6 and 6.2 in particular, where it states the commercial manager's post has already been incorporated into the budget for this financial year. Does that mean that the procurement officer's post and the data and projects officer's post hasn't been budgeted for? Because I'm assuming from the questions, etc., and the report from the chief officer is that those two other posts are going to be advertised sometime later this year. And if that's the case, if it hasn't been budgeted for, where is the money coming from?
Okay, Councillor Jones, this report is slightly out of time with the report that the Chief Finance Officer will be bringing in July in relation to financing the RTI plan, and the two additional posts are part of that plan. But because of the structure change that we're actually recommending to create the commercial unit, then this report has come in advance.
So in the future report we'll have next month, there will be, it will refer to how we're going to finance these two other posts. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Chris Davis is next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're on a roll this evening in terms of obviously what we are looking to do with regards to our procurement and obviously setting up of a commercial unit in the council with the two reports that are in front of us this evening. What I wanted to say really, and it's a question for Councillor Thomas and Alan, and ask that we give consideration now that we're looking to bring obviously the procurement together with the commercial unit, learning from our experience obviously of payments of grants and awards to businesses throughout the pandemic, is that we give and ask that we give consideration to how we contract and commission services. You know, Councillor Thomas mentioned about £79 million in an earlier part of the discussion in council this evening, that we need to get better, I think, as an organisation in terms of how we contract and commission. So I'd like to hear about how the next steps will be from Alan, how we look to do that as part of the process that we're going along.
Do you want me to start, Alan? You can come in behind me.
Yes, please, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah. Setting out the strategic commercial unit in the phases, Chris, that like in phase 3 of that phase, it's looking at our external partners and how you know we contract out. So it is in the process, and if Alan will come in now with the detail.
I hope I haven't scared him off, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, you're on mute, Alan.
I do apologise. I tried to take a phone call. My mother hasn't been very well. Can you repeat that, please?
What I said, Al, was what Chris asked, the question he asked. We are looking in phase 3 of our external review, looking to our third party and RSL partners, and looking at our spend and our contracts.
Yeah, as Councillor Thomas has said, if you look through the phases of development, then a critical part in the third phase is that discussion with our social value partners. Now, obviously, this report is only being discussed tonight, but we've already met with 2 of the RSLs in Merthyr to discuss potential opportunities for procurement and commercial activity already. Probably one of the biggest social value partners that we also need to engage with is the University Health Board, because of the amount of joint work that potentially we could do together. But definitely, Councillor Davis, a big element of this development is around social value, not just commercial value.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, just to say, really welcome that, and obviously in my role as the Regional Partnership Board Chair, we're doing some work around social value through the Regional Partnership Board and our contracting and commissioning, so I welcome really joining all that up together with the Health Board and the local authorities across Cwm Taf Morgannwg. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Ian Thomas is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was looking at paragraph 6.1, where you're itemising the total staff costs for each of these roles. And the commercial manager, total staff costs of 56,000. So when you take into account all the on costs and pensions and things, that doesn't seem like a very high salary level to me, especially considering that this could well be a very crucial role. And I'd just like to ask, is everyone satisfied that this job has been pitched at a high enough level?
If you notice with the financial finance we got there, we've actually included a top up because we didn't think that our original calculations were quite right. And Councillor Thomas, we're not really sure is the answer. This is our first endeavour to actually test the market, but on anecdotal information that we've looked at, we believe that we will be able to find someone with commercial experience, a broad brush commercial experience that we need to actually embed into this unit. But obviously, we need to test the market and find out if there is an issue. Then obviously we'll be coming back to council with that.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Julian Amos is next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question really for Caris. Going back to what Councillor Jones said in the beginning, he made a suggestion about something that should have been there amongst the recommendations, and Alan and Geraint accepted that without a formal amendment. We're being asked to vote on this now. Shouldn't a form of words go into the recommendation there so we're crystal clear for the record as to what it is? Because otherwise we're simply voting on this as it stands. Shouldn't there be a form of words there that reflect what Councillor Jones was saying? Otherwise this goes through basically without any amendment at all. I don't really see that at all, how that could work.
It hasn't gone through without amendment. It has been amended with the agreement of the person who was proposing it. So it didn't need to go through as a formal amendment in the sense that you needed to vote on it as a separate issue.
No, I know that. I realise that.
It has to be clear what you are voting on. And so when we come to the point where you're going to vote, I'll ask probably Alan to just tell us what that recommendation is going to read, because there's going to be the inclusion of those specific roles. I think in discussion we have exactly what that recommendation is going to say, but we can just clarify it and make sure that everybody knows exactly what they're saying before they vote.
That's right. Thank you, Carys.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ian Thomas, still got your hand up.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no more questions, then we'll go to comments then, please. Councillor Darren Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Carys, you're not cracking up. My hand did go up, but I took it down because the very question that I was going to ask was actually asked by Councillor Skinner, and that was around the job description, if that could be forwarded to members. So thank you, Alan, for agreeing to do that. My comment is around this position. It's crucial that we get the right person in post to deliver on the transformation and the commercialisation agenda that we're looking at the RTA. For me, we can't just rely on the council taxpayer of the county borough and Welsh Government for our funding. We've got to look at it with a commercial head on. And with that in mind, we've got to make sure that the right person has got the relative experience, certainly the right mindset and vision to be able to transform the local authority through this agenda. So I welcome this report. It is a very, very good report, and I can't wait to start getting moving on this, because it is long overdue, and it is something that we need to give our utmost attention and focus on to make sure that we do attract the revenues for the local authority that's greatly needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Skinner, please.
Okay, it was just to say I have to make a comment on the fact that Councillor Thomas seems to think the £56,000 a year isn't enough. To me, that's a huge salary, but that's just personal opinion. And if we had the job description, it might be easier for us to determine if that 56 is adequate or not, and also if there was some evidence of benchmarking being used, that might also help. But just to say that, you know, I think that we do need job descriptions in the future. If we're going to be asked to authorise these posts, then we do need the full information in order to make that decision. And the other thing I would just add to that is I would hope that Alan touched on that this is also a social obligation, and I would hope that we would look to the findings of recent work carries out with our support to the third sector, and I would hope to see that this post also makes use of all opportunities available within third sector as well.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Lisa Mitten, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, Mr. Mayor, not taking aside all of the deliberation and discussions we've had regarding this particular agenda item, all of which are very valid, and I know that our officers led by Alan and Geraint Thomas will provide that information to everybody. But it is long overdue, but it needed some work in detail. We will provide that information, as I just said. But what an opportunity for us now to establish this commercial unit, working with such a successful economic development provision as well, embedding that into that particular portfolio. You know, we took the opportunity to change the portfolio title for Councillor Geraint Thomas back in February with regards to that commercialisation and transformation aspect in there, and that is what it does. That is what it says on the tin. It is about driving that commercialisation forward, making sure we've got that localisation, making sure we've got that social value in there as well, but of course then taking us further into our aspirations with regards to the RTI plan, you know, recovering, transforming and improving, taking Merthyr Tydfil into the future. So I welcome the report and commend my colleague for bringing it to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Carys, just for clarification, Councillor Andrew Barry has his hand up, but has he seconded it? Do we need to take Councillor Clive Jones and Councillor Ian Thomas first?
No, Councillor Barry won't close the debate. It's only Councillor Geraint Thomas who will close the debate. So Councillor Barry can go next.
Right, okay, thank you. So Councillor Andrew Barry then, please.
Lovely. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I mean, this represents a sea change in the direction of how we operate. I think, and it's not often you'll hear me say this, but I've got to applaud Darren in terms of identifying the fact that we can no longer rely on Welsh Government funding as our sole sort of source of income. We have to look at things differently. You know, we're on a tremendous journey of transformation, and this is one of the key pillars of making sure that this authority becomes sustainable in the long term. We spend £79 million a year. We are without doubt a major commercial player in this market, and we need to appreciate that. I mean, we've all heard, oh, it's just the council, or it's because we're the council. No, we're a major commercial operator in the market, and we need to understand that. And I think bringing a commercial acumen into the heart of the authority will give us that ability to change that attitude towards who and what we are and how we buy and procure our services. I think it's an excellent report. It's a direction we have no choice in taking. If we want to be sustainable long term, we have to have this type of role at the heart of what we do. And I applaud Alan, and we've had, myself and Geraint have had many conversations about this development, and I'm so pleased to see it coming tonight. I'm pleased to see the identification by members that we need this is great to see. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too welcome the report. It is perhaps overdue, and hopefully we're going to see when the unit is up and functioning and all the officers are in post, that we have value for money for everything that's spent via procurement. And at the end of the day, I would want to see that we be saving hopefully a great deal of money for the local authority. In relation to the new staffing costs, my understanding is that, because Councillor Skinner referred to the commercial manager's post at that salary, that we have to include all the on costs in those figures. So the 56,000, for example, for the commercial manager would include all the on costs in there. My view, Mr. Mayor, is that perhaps if this commercial unit has been up and running, fully functioning, that we evaluate in perhaps a 12 months time that it's running properly and that we are having value for money for particularly the cost of the additional staff in there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Ian Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Clive. I was just going to respond to Tanya on that very point about staffing costs and salaries being two different things. But Clive has explained it now, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Chris Davis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, as other people have said this evening, the portfolio member and the leader, this is a really exciting opportunity and a turning of the corner for Merthyr Tydfil in terms of how we take forward, how we deliver, procure, contract, commission services for the people of the county borough. And how we engage with the business community. I think there's real crossover between this report and the earlier report about procurement rules, how they dovetail together. Absolutely, we've got to stamp social value over this. The opportunities we've got to work with the third and community sector as real partners in supporting us as a council. Our opportunities to integrate, collaborate with other partners, RSLs, Health Board, other public and wider private sector, business and third sector taken forward actually to secure the best services at a sustainable, rate to get the best outcomes for the communities and residents of the county borough that we serve. So really, really exciting times, and I hope that all members will get behind this to, put Merthyr Council on a sustainable footing. We're trying to be financially prudent. Now is our opportunity to shine and show that we are a commercially viable and sustainable council for the 21st century. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Julian Amos, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a point really drawing on from the one made by Councillors Clive Jones, Ian Thomas and Tanya Skinner. I think this we really have to have value for money out of this new unit and the members of staff that we put in there. And for that reason, I express the hope that there's going to be some form of performance management to, at the end of a given time, whatever, that we are actually, those people are earning their corn. And I hope we can have some sort of system in place to measure that performance, and possibly at that time, whether a report goes back to council or wherever, that we can have that assurance. Because if we employ these people and they don't do the job, well, there's no point in having them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Amos. Are there any other comments before we move it to the vote? No, so I'll hand over to Karis then, please.
Yeah. Can I ask, therefore, thank you, Mr. Mayor, can I ask that Alan, if he's still there, I know that he's having some issues, it can just read what recommendation 2.3 is now going to be? Or Councillor Gary can do it.
Okay, what I'd suggest, because obviously we want to capture the full ask for the additional staff. As we've said, Monton Officer, the commercial manager has previously been approved. So can I suggest that the 2.3 reads the appointment of a commercial manager and the recruitment of 2 additional staff, comma, a strategic procurement officer and data officer.
Thank you. So if everybody's clear that those are the recommendations, can I then move to the vote and ask, would all members who wish to abstain please show now? Thank you. Would all members who wish to vote against please show now? Thank you. Would all members voting in favour please show now? Thank you, that's carried.
Thank you very much, Karis. If everybody could take their hands down, please. We'll move on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is tree policy, to consider the report of the Chief Officer Neighbourhood Services. And I understand that Councillor David Hughes is taking us through this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The summary report is found in 1.1 to 1.4. Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council is responsible for the management of all trees grown on its land and has a programme of inspection and maintenance works aimed at keeping the population safe from harm and the preserving of the health and future of the well-being of the tree stock. However, conflicts may arise where councils' trees are located close to neighbouring properties. The aim of the policy is to set out the council's stance in dealing with these conflicts and to clarify the council's legal obligations. Once adopted, the tree policy that can be found at Appendix 1 will ensure that all trees-related queries are dealt with in a fair and transparent and consistent way, and will aid the resolution of conflict between the public and the local authority. It will act as a framework for officers and councillors alike, and will ensure efficient use of the council's resources. As the recommendations found in 2.1 are a new tree policy be approved, I therefore move.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Have we got a seconder, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mitten. Are there any questions? Councillor Harvey-Jones, you still have your hand up. Is that from the previous vote? Yes, I think it is. So we'll go to Councillor Gareth Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question for the Cabinet member, please. Councillor Hughes, it's a question for you, and I hope you would ensure that officers exercise their discretion under paragraph 4.2 of the policy. That's where council trees are overhanging private property. Obviously, I, as a good neighbour, keep my trees within my boundaries, as do my neighbours, and as a public authority, I think we owe a higher level of responsibility than an ordinary two households. So that's my question. Please ensure that discretion is not restricted under paragraph 4.2 with trees overhanging private properties.
Yes, Gareth, I agree with that, and I would like to see a fair and transparent way of dealing with that, and that we don't throw the baby out with bathwater, that we do remember that we're here to serve the public. So thank you, Ennio, for that comment.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Are there any other questions?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Hughes, and thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Can you lower your hand, Councillor Richards, please? Okay, thank you. And then we'll move on. Are there any comments?
No, Mr. Mayor.
There are no comments. Can we take it to the vote then, please, Caris?
Yes, so can I ask all members who are going to abstain on this item, please show now. Thank you. Can I ask all members who wish to vote against, please show now. Thank you. And all those members voting in favour, please show now. Thank you, that's carried.
Okay, my screen went blank there for a second. Caris, was that carried?
Yes, sorry, yes, that's carried. So we just need everyone to put their hands down and then we'll move on, Mr. Mayor, when you're ready.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item number 9, appointment of the tree officer to consider the report of the Chief Officer Neighbourhood Services. And that's Councillor David Hughes again, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Summary of the report is found in 1.1 to 1.2. The local authority has the responsibility for the management of trees on land which it owns, systems for protecting trees via the tree preservation orders, and to some extent dangerous trees on other person's land. In view of the current Ash Dieback situation and the amount of work associated with there being a requirement for the council to have a dedicated permanent tree officer, the recommendations are found in 2.1. the appointment of a permanent tree officer be approved. I therefore move.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Midden. Are there any questions? There's no. Oh yes, Councillor Skinner is indicating.
Yeah, it was a question around, one was the two questions. One was what are the issues with the secondment? Why couldn't we carry that on, for example? And then the second question is around something that came up in the presentation. We envision that the Ash Dieback will be dealt with in 5 years' time, and there's obviously a significant amount of work to be done in that 5 years. And I take the point that trees will continue to need to be inspected, but the difference between those work streams are very different. So my question is, what happens after the 5 years, and should we be having a permanent post if there's not significant work to justify it?
With the Ash Dieback, there's lots of work being generated at the moment. However, with the amount of trees that are being planted every year, and with the new carbon agenda on, we'd be looking to be planting more trees, and we want to make sure that we plant them in a safe manner, and that should be the responsibility of someone who got them skills done. So that's why we are recommending that we have a permanent tree officer.
Can somebody answer my question on the secondment? Is that somebody, is it an officer maybe?
Yes, I'll come in there, Councillor Skinner, if you want. Yeah, the secondment has been in operation for 2 years now. It's not an ideal situation because the backfilling position has been backfilled with agency staff. Sometimes we can't always get the skills that we want. So this sort of informal arrangement isn't ideal. Going forward, we would like that a permanent position where the staff in the arboricultural section are all qualified and employed permanently by the council. There are inherent risks with agency staff. They come and go, and we have to be sure that they are qualified and capable, and changing in staff is a drawn-out process. So it would be better if this appointment was a permanent one. Okay. Also, going forward, I think the other part of the question was, why can't we continue this secondment after the Ash Dieback works? I won't say ended because it doesn't end as such. It's an ongoing thing. The obligation on the council, we have many thousands of trees, and we have been inadequately dealing with that in the past. We have always been reactive. But in this day and age, we should be proactive, because if something did happen, we would be heavily criticised and possibly prosecuted because we didn't have the systems of inspection in place. There's a lot of work to be done by this tree officer, and going forward, I think it's essential. We've talked a lot about transition and forward working. Let's not forget on the legacy we've got of the trees, places like Merthyr Park. All this investment has to be looked after, and we need that professional recruit.
Thank you, Rob. Just one other thing. It was around benchmarking. I don't know if we've got anybody here from HR. Maybe Caris would know. But do we benchmark the new positions? Do we put them out for benchmarking?
I'm afraid I don't know. When you say put them out to benchmark, what do you mean? Comparators with other authorities as to what are paid and that kind of thing?
Yeah, Carrie. So I'm not quite sure what local authorities do, but I know with organisations, if they're creating a new post, they tend to they use a benchmarking service to determine, like you said, really what the standard salary is. So it was just curious whether we utilise that. If there's nobody to answer that this evening, I wonder whether somebody. Sorry, go ahead.
So I might be able to answer. So as part of our job evaluation scheme, Councillor Skinner, we use a GLPC scheme, it's Greater London model. And as part of that, we do tend to look, as part of the information that's gathered via that process, we do look at benchmarking as part of the factors. So, and part of the issues we try to deal with is making sure that we are dealing with the market issues of the day as well.
Okay, thank you, Alice.
If I can confirm as well then, Councillor Skinner, what we also do is when we have new posts within the structures, we go out to other local authorities and benchmark as well. So we'll ask them for their structures and what the grades of the roles that they are within and their salary structures.
Okay, thank you, Fran.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Skinner. Are there any other questions? Councillor Julian Amos, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a Rob has said really that to a certain extent, so far we've been very reactive, and from the way I interpret it, this is a big element of catch up, and that's hence the 5-year plan. I suppose really what I want to know is we've gone on for so long with a reactive approach, and I'm unaware of any problems. I'd just like to know what has triggered. Is there anything at all triggered us needing to have this policy? That's my first question. And one, possibly you've touched on with your answer to Tanya's question, Councillor Skinner's question, and that says when we've done our catch up, presumably over this 5-year term, will this person still be required, or will it be a need then to keep the show things ticking over? Those are my two questions really, for Rob really.
Thank you, Councillor Amos. To answer the question, why now? Because of the Ash Dieback, which is a national problem, as Judith indicated earlier on, we had to carry out an assessment of the scale of the problem in Merthyr Tydfil. So in essence, we had to do a survey of all trees. That survey of the whole borough has not only given us or shown us the extent of the work required on Ash Dieback, but it has also shown us the future work that is needed on our other trees. So that is why it's now really, is because it's resulting out of the Ash Dieback inspections. And as I said to Councillor Skinner, I think it's important to have that permanent position because of the amount of trees we've got, and we're lucky in Merthyr Tydfil, and visitors often comment on the amount of trees and the greenery, which is obviously an asset. We've got to look after those assets, and we should have the proper qualified people to do so.
Councillor Amos, if you asked another question, you were on mute, or have you finished?
No, I was saying thank you to Robert, actually.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Amos. Could you just lower your hand then, please, Julian? Thank you. Are there any other questions? No one is indicating. Are there any comments, please? No, there are no comments, so I'll hand you over to Karis for the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask all those who wish to abstain on this item, can you please show now? Thank you. All those who wish to vote against, please show now. Thank you. All those in favour, please show now. And that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. So if everybody could lower their hands again then, please. And we'll move on to item 10 on the agenda, Wales Probation Service, to consider the report of the Chief Officer Neighbourhood Services. And that's Councillor David Hughes again taking us through this, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The summary is found in 1.1 to 1.4. The council's street scene service has been in discussion with Wales Probation Service in relation to participating the community payback service. I'm sure you all know what community payback, so I won't read that. It is intended that the community payback users will work 3 days a week and will carry out tasks such as prepping and painting railings, weeding, grass cutting, and trimming, litter picking, and emptying bins. Wales Probation Service seek an annual contribution towards the cost of supervision of the placement, transporting the service users, the tools and equipment amounting to 21,000 ex-VAT. The recommendations are found in 2.1. The annual contribution of 21k ex-VAT to the Wales Probation Service in return for the use of the community payback service be approved. I therefore move.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder, please?
Yes, I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mitton. Questions? Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome the report. My question is based on the issue of the probation controlled staff who will be doing this. Those have got various sentences. Can I have an assurance that the community service they provide will be in addition to the permanent workforce, and that they won't be required to cover vacant posts in any of the areas that they undertake their particular work?
Yes, I can confirm that, Councillor Jones, that is the case. They are in addition.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Are there any other questions? Councillor Darren Roberts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just looking for reassurance, really. I mean, I think this this scheme is extremely, it's extremely good. Sorry, it's not just about community payback, but it's about rehabilitation and mental health and everything that goes with it. So, there's two sides to every story. Yes, they'll be paying back and giving a bit back to the community, but there's also an element for themselves to gain from it. But my question is, would this be rolled out borough-wide? Because a lot of things tend to go on a town-centric. So, I'd like to see this rolled out borough-wide, but I'd like it to go a little bit further than that, Judith, and that is, could members be liaised with? So, for instance, I use an example. If the probation service are in the Merthyr Tydfil ward first week in August, maybe Scott and myself could be consulted to see if there's anything specific in the ward that we would like them to work on. Because I think, having the input from the ward members is crucial to make this get the biggest impact for the county borough.
Yeah, Councillor, and we'd welcome that liaison as well, because that'll obviously help us plan our work as well. Just to make you aware, we've been working with the probation service over the last couple of months now to formulate this, and we'll be given our own kind of local liaison officer from the probation service. So we'll be working directly with them to plan the work. But yes, by all means, liaison with ward members would be extremely useful.
I think it's pertinent to say that with at the moment, because of the pandemic, that the restrictions on the movement of the men, Darren, that they can't transport them all in one bus because of the amount of men. So at the beginning of the project, I would envisage they'd be put in into places where they would be at the site, working out of a site until the restrictions are widened, and then they can be transported by the manager.
Yeah, I accept that, Councillor Hughes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Andrew Barry, please.
Yeah, it's just on the subject that Darren's brought up there, Judith. It's great to hear that you want the member involvement per ward. How do you see that working? Do you just want to take phone calls? Is there a system you're going to set up for that?
I think it'd be prudent for us to set up a system so that it's coordinated rather than just ad hoc phone calls. So if we can, just have a week or so to arrange that, and then we'll email out to all councillors advising how to participate in that.
Can I just suggest then that using a very technical term for town ward, first dabs?
I'd just like to point out to Councillor Barry, we haven't voted on this yet.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barry. Are there any further questions, please? No. Are there any comments then, please? Councillor Chris Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wanted to thank Judith and Councillor Hughes for the work they put into this in terms of liaising with probation service. I think £21,000 for coordinating costs to NPS is going to be absolutely money well spent. I think Councillor Jones was right to say that this needs to be additionality to any core staff within the authority, that we add value to this. And also this is about, as Councillor Roberts said, about well-being of those individuals who are doing community service, doing community payback as part of any sentence obviously levied upon them by the court. This will absolutely only be a good thing for us as county borough councillors. I just wish really that some of the residents of the county borough took more pride in our communities, the state of some of our streets, some of our green areas. There's lots of people in Merthyr Tydfil County Borough should be appalled and ashamed at the way they leave our streets, our green spaces. My ward in particular has been absolutely blighted by that in recent months. It's a disgrace. This can only be a positive thing. I know that we're doing work with Keep Wells Tidy on establishing litter hubs, which will only complement this great work and great borough that we've got, that we all have got a duty to keep clean and green and safe for us all to enjoy and live in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Are there any other comments? No, there are no more comments, so I'll hand you back over to Caris then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can everybody who wishes to abstain please show now? Thank you. Can everybody wishing to vote against please show now? Thank you. And can all those voting in favour please show now? And that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. If we could all lower our hands, please, then, members. And we'll move on to item number 11 on the agenda, appointment of Deputy Chief Executive to consider the attached report. And I understand that the leader, Councillor Lisa Mitten, is taking this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I am. The summary of the report is there at 1.1. The report seeks approval to implement shortlisting and interview arrangements to appoint a new Deputy Chief Executive, which needs to occur prior to the secondment terminating for the interim Deputy Chief Executive on the 22nd of October 2021. And of course, in response to the coronavirus COVID-19 emergency, the shortlisting and interview timetable will be flexible, with most of the process being completed virtually. Delegated authority at 1.2 is sought for the head of human resources and organisational development, pensions and payroll to determine the recruitment timetable and any changes that may be required to be made to the interview panels in consultation with myself and the Cabinet Member for Governance and Corporate Services. At 1.3, the final appointment decision will be determined at Council. And of course, within the body of the report, it sets out who will be on those panels as well. At 2.1, the recommendations are the shortlisting and interview arrangements to appoint a new Deputy Chief Executive be approved. And at 2.2, the granting of delegated authority, the Head of HR and Organisational Development, Pensions and Payroll to determine the recruitment timetable and any changes that may be required to be made to the interview panels in consultation with the leader and the Cabinet Member for Governance and Corporate Services be approved. And therefore I move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mitton. Is there a seconder for that, please?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I second the report there by the leader.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Are there any questions on the report?
No, Mr.
No,
Mayor.
no one is indicating. Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Chris Davis.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, just a very brief one for me in terms of 4.3 of the report. I'm absolutely delighted that hopefully Council will approve the inclusion of a young person from the Merthyr Tydfil Borough-wide Youth Forum. I just think it goes to show this Council's commitment to involving, as we've said, children and young people in the key decisions of this authority. Children and young people are our future in terms of the well-being of future generations of Merthyr Tydfil, and I'm sure you'll all be as equally as proud as I am in terms of this council's commitment to our work in terms of participation of children and young people in the council's work.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Are there any other comments? No, there are no other comments, so I'll pass you back over to Caris.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So can I please ask all those who wish to abstain, please show now. Thank you. All those voting against, please show now. Thank you. All those voting in favour, please show now. And that's carried, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. If everybody would lower their hands, please. And then we'll move on to item 12 to deal with any other urgent business or correspondence. There is none. Item 13 to receive communications from His Worship the Mayor. There are none. So it's now proposed that we move item 14, we move into closed session. So if someone would like to propose section 100, please.
Yes, I'd like to propose that, please, Mr Mayor, and move for section 100.
Thank you, Councillor Minton. Is there a seconder for that, please?
Mr Mayor, I second the section 100.
Okay, thank you. So we take that to the vote then, please.
Yes, just before we do, can I please check that everybody is in a private place? Anybody who is going to engage in the closed session, you will need to be in a private place. I appreciate it's a particularly special evening, but I don't think we can have people anywhere in public if they're going into a closed session. If you are in a public place and you can't go somewhere private, you will have to leave. So on that basis, can I see if anybody who wishes to abstain on the issue of section 100, please show now. Thank you. Anyone wishing to vote against section 100, please show now. Thank you. And all those voting in favour of section 100, please show now. And that's carried, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. If you could all lower our hands.